Hello everyone, welcome to the Coach Dave Academy YouTube channel. My name is Tanguy Billon from Mivano, and today I will take you for a track guide around Sebring in the Ferrari 499. So here we are, starting the Hotlap on Sebring with the Ferrari 499. We stay as close as possible to the wall, running up to T1, down to 5th gear, as close as possible to the wall, nice and early on the throttle. Down to 2nd gear here, clip the curb. Nice and early and especially smooth on the throttle for this corner. Now we are running down to the hairpin. We spot the braking point. Nice and firm on the brakes. Especially here, very smooth on the throttle. You really don't want to slip too much the rear tires, not overheat for this next corner. Hug the inside curb, nice and smooth on the throttle. Like as wide as possible, and then down the inside to throttle application to prepare for these back straights, and onto Sunset Bends for the last corner of this track. We run as wide as possible, use all the track available, nice and smooth, early on the throttle. Use it to control the rotation you have up to the wall. So now let's have a look at what happened from the outside. Start the lap. We are going up to T1. As we said, we want to be as close as possible to the outside wall so that we can take the widest line possible. Your braking marker for this corner will be depending on your fuel load, depending on the wind, but you see this little kink in the wall. You want to brake with this car a tiny bit earlier, so all the other cars GTB want to start braking at this kink a tiny bit earlier depending on the wind. From 6th gear we go down to 5th gear. For a reference, you can stay a bit on the outside of this orange line. It's a nice reference so you don't turn in too early or too late. When you go to the cockpit view, you will see a cone on the fence. It can be a nice reference for the apex. This is the apex of the corner, so this is the point where you want to be the closest to the wall as possible. And then this corner you want to carry basically as much speed as possible. So you want to go on the throttle as early as you can. We stay nice and smooth on the throttle to control the rotation, to not overstress the rear tires. Now up to turn 2. When you exit T1, you want to use as much of the curb as possible on the outside, and you want to swing your way by all the way to T2, so that your car is perfectly straight when you are going to the braking zones. The braking zone for turn 2, it will be a tiny bit before the 3 cones and a bit later than the little kink on the road there. So between the two. Your turning point will be a tiny bit before the single cone there, and the apex of this corner will not be the first kink on the curb, it will be the second one. You want to brush it. You can a tiny bit mount it, it cannot settle the car, but you want to be as close as possible to it and not carry that much speed in the corner, because you will overstress the front right tires, which you will need a lot for the next corner. Nice on the throttle. You don't really want to go max throttle here, so you're not overheating the rear tires, to not put too much stress on it, because there is a very big traction zone coming up, so you want to keep the tires alive for these corners. You want to mount this curb a lot. It gives a lot of rotation and the car is made for it, so you won't have any stability issue, but you want to mount all of it. If you mount too much, meaning if the middle of the cow here is outside of this curb, you might have an off track, but you can mount it a lot, as we do here. Too wide, to stay very tight to this curb. To prepare for the next corner, you want to stay as close as possible here. For the next one, your braking point is very easy. It is the end of this curb. You start braking, turning very smooth on the steering wheel to not overstress either tires. And once again, as close as early as you can on the throttle here. You want to be very smooth to not have too much slip in the rear tires, to not overheat them once again. We run all the way to the curb. Coming onto the hairpin. The hairpin, your braking zones will be a tiny bit before the 4 stacked cones. It's a bit of a bumpy braking zones, so you don't want to be hitting max braking instantly, otherwise when the car will start to be on the bumps, you might experience lockups. So you want to leave a tiny bit of margin for the bumps. Your apex will be right in the middle. You want to mount this curb. It's 3D curb, but it doesn't matter. It gives a nice rotation to the car. Nice and steady on the throttle until the car is straight. Then you can be a tiny bit more aggressive, but still not much. Coming out to Cunningham corner, your braking zones will be at the 4 stacked cones. Once again, it's nice braking zones. For the early part of the stint, you might want to brake a tiny bit earlier, but at this point, you can brake at the 4 stacked cones. You don't want to mount this curb, it will unsettle the car, but you want to be as close to it as possible. This section is extremely tricky. Before you could take it completely flat out, now it's not the case. So we are putting a tiny bit of lift to load again the front tires a tiny bit. And you don't want to go full throttle basically anywhere here for this corner, but you don't want to lift too much either. What you want to do is lift slightly before it, so you don't carry too much speed, and then instead of pumping the throttle during this sequence of corners, which will most likely unsettle the car and removes your grip, you want to be as smooth as possible on the throttle, but with a single applications. Let's have a look at Delta to see how we did with the throttle application and the temperatures in the rears, because this is extremely important. So here we are on the Delta, coming out to Cunningham corner. So you are going to do a slight lift for the triple left-hander. Concerning the throttle application, you don't want to pump the throttle because it will mess up the weight transfer of the car and it will cause overheat in the tires. You want to have a very smooth, very gentle throttle application to be very gentle with the weight transfer of your car. So here I'm not pumping the throttle or anything, and I'm not overcorrecting the car either, which means regarding the temperatures during this specific corner sequence, when you look at the rear temperatures, of course the rear right is a bit rising because it's under a lot of stress. But the rear left is not, which means I'm not sliding the car, and this is extremely important to keep the heat down and to maintain a delta very low between the heat of the core of the tires and the surface stems of the tires. If the difference will be too high, what will happen is that for the next corner, which is coming here, the tower corners, if you are sliding the rears during this triple left-hander, you will put way too much stress on it. And for tower corners, where when you will want to go back on throttle, you will find a lack of traction, and this is quite a big straight coming up afterwards. And if you mess up the exit, you will lose a lot of time there. So it's extremely important to not have any wheel slip for this sequence of corners. Same for tower corner. I might have slipped a tiny bit on here because there is a small bump here, but it's a bit normal. At some point you can't really avoid it, but what you want to avoid as much as you can is a big peak here. This is somewhat nice. I'm not reaching too high in terms of temperatures, but you really don't want to go higher than that, because otherwise the issue you made for the triple left-hander will carry on to tower corners, and then it will carry on once again for the Le Mans SS, which is something you really don't want, because then you start building too much temperatures in the tires, and before you know it, your whole stint is gone in terms of pace and the stability of the car as well. So nice single throttle application here. If you are lacking some rear grip, instead of staying full throttle and making a correction with the wheel, you want to straighten the wheel a bit, and if you're feeling like it, go a tiny bit wider here. It's more important to maybe lose a few 100s short term here by straightening a bit the wheel and taking a tiny bit longer line, than to have a little snap oversteer, because it will really mess up the tires for the end and lose a lot of pace later on in the stint. So coming on to tower corners, you want to brake either a bit before these 3 stacked cones, or depending if you're too much inside, you want to brake at the end of this curb. Straightening the cars, it's very important, using all the roads here, but not really mounting the curb. The turn-in is, it's a bit tricky this corner, because there is a camber positive that you want to use, because it gives you a nice rotation, and you want to apply the throttle nice and early, nice before the apex. So it settles the rear of the car, because if you're not doing that, you might experience a snap oversteer at the end of this corner, which will not be beneficial for the end of the stint and the end of this lap. So nice and early on the throttle. You don't want to mount this curb. You want to brush it slightly. However, if there is rain during the race, during the rain there will be puddles of water here. So if there is, you want to mount this curb so the car goes over the water, which is beneficial. So you don't have aquaplaning. But for the dry, you want to brush this curb as close as possible without mounting it. We use all the curb on the exit to widen the corner as much as we can. Now this is standard corner, you want to stay as close as possible to the curbs, flat out. Coming to the Le Mans SS, your braking marker will be end of this curb, or if you are later in the stint, the car is lighter, you can brake at the 3 stacked cones. Nice and easy here. You want to mount the curb as much as you can without the tires hitting this edge here. With the 3D curbs now, it will unsettle the car a lot and you might lose it. With these new cars and the 3D curbs, you can't really mount them as we used to do. So you want to have the outer side of the tires as close as possible to this edge without crossing it. We make a little lift between the two at the weight transition so that we put back some weight on the front tires to help the rotation of the car. We don't need to touch the brakes. And once again, one single motion on the throttle. We are cutting the curb on the inside so that in this game we can widen out the corner as much as we can. We carry as much speed as possible, widen the corner to prepare the exit for the back straight, which is an important straight. It's quite long. We tap the brakes slightly. We don't want to lose too much speed, but we want to be as early as we can on the throttle. We are not really mounting the curb as said. It can unsettle a bit the car and it can ruin a bit your traction out of this corner, and traction is extremely important to this corner. We are running all the way to the outside curve, widen the corner as much as we can. And we're on the back straight, coming out to Sunset Bend. This is a bit of a tricky corner, extremely important as well. Your braking marker for this corner will be the 2 stacked cones. If you are on the right side, making a pass going for an overtake, remember it lines up with this line on the floor, on the ground. So you can use it as well as a braking marker if you are going inside for a move. So we take the brake at the 2 cones and we want to run as wide as we can. So all the way to the cones. These cars have a lot of downforce with aerodynamics, so you want to use it as much as we can, so carry as much speed as possible through this corner. So all the way to the cones. Outside of this white line, this is not a track white line, so you can fully go onto it. I don't advise to go outside the cones, for the simple reasons that these cones can give you contact 0, so it can give you damage. So it's not nice. And all the way to the cones, this gives you a really nice ratio between the speed you can carry and how early you can go on the throttle, because the more speed you can carry, the earlier you can go on the throttle, which is very nice for the end of the lap. Your apex for this corner will be the little small dent, rounded thing at the wall, so this is the part where you want to be as close as possible to the wall. This corner you want to be as early as possible on the throttle also, and not run too wide. If you are running wider, let's say here under the bridge, you might experience some unwanted bumps, and the car will just understeer and you will lose a lot of time because of it. You want to start loading the rear as early as possible to prepare for the exit, as there is a nice straight coming up. Once again, you want to have a nice throttle application, not hammer it, and not rely that much on the traction control. On this corner, the throttle will sort of manage the amount of rotation you'll get, so the more throttle you output, the more rotation you will get. And this corner you don't want to light up the rears, triggering too much TC, because otherwise for T1 you are at risk of spinning out on entry. We run as close as possible to the wall once again to widen out the exit. And this was a lap around Sebring. So that's the end for this track guide. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to take care of your tires. The race is very long, the stints are very long, and this will be the main points of this endurance with these cars now, taking care of your tires. If you enjoyed this track guide, don't forget to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and I will see you for the next one.